Hi, everyone. Welcome back to episode 49 of the Soldiers of Cinema podcast. I am Cullen McFader, and joined with me, as always, is that the correct? I don't know.
I'm
No, that's
joined.
grammar.
I'm joined
Yeah.
at the hip. I'm connected.
Yes, exactly.
I am
My-
your
my-
cinema conjoined twin.
Yes, Clark Coffee.
Hey.
Somehow we are 1,000 miles apart, but still conjoined. So
Via the magic of cinema.
yes, exactly, and specifically the magic of Edward D. Wood Jr.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, we're doing one of my favorites today, Ed Wood, Tim Burton, 1994.
Amazing.
Or is it 93?
No,
94, 93?
Released,
94.
Yeah, released
Yes.
in 94 in September. September 23rd to be exact. It was New
Initial
York
release,
Film
yeah.
Festival release, and then it was released nationwide September 30th. So I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to be USA centric. That's just the data that I have before me. I don't know if it was released in Canada at the same time or not.
I think most of our releases are lined up.
Pretty well
usually, so-
tied. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as always, I'm super curious as to, well, I have some hunches, but I'm curious as to why, as such a youngin, you would be interested in a film that came out kind of before your time, but you said it's one of your favorites. And so let's jump into that. Our personal experiences with the film. We'll start off with there. So yeah, tell us a little bit more about why you picked the film and what's going on with you in this flick.
I think it's just, to put it frankly, it's a very charming film. It's almost like a comfort food in a film format.
It is. It's super charming.
It's really funny. It's really stylized. It's well done. All the performances are great. The music's fantastic. It's just one of those movies that you kind of can put on and you're just pretty much smiling the entire way through.
I mean, especially if you love cinema, and especially if you're a filmmaker, right? Because I think it kind of helps you feel a little bit better about being a freak.
Mm-hmm. and I've got a note about imposter syndrome and that kind of thing about how do you know if you're any good, and both of us just worked on features separately, and I think that's definitely a question I'm asking myself constantly is is this thing just a huge piece of crap and I just think it's good because I made it. So yeah, I think that's, to me, there's this super empathetic, relatable side of this movie, but it's done so, it's referred to a lot as a biopic, but I don't think that it's, I think that we kind of agree that it's not really that's not the classification I'd put it under.
Yeah.
It's much more of a, in the spirit of Ed Wood. It's something that's kind of trying to capture the essence of his filmmaking and stuff like that, much more than the essence of his life, because his life in reality was much more depressing and
sadly,
and sad, and not that this movie necessarily shies away from the fact that he was, to put it simply, kind of a failure in that regard, and that he didn't really succeed in his dreams of becoming a really successful Orson Welles type of filmmaker. But at the same time, it plays all of that with kind of a really, a lot of heart.
Yeah, a lot of love. A lot of love.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's not, and it's never, it's never making a mockery of him. It's, in fact, it's very, very empathetic to all of these. Like you kind of said, that it's almost a little bit of a kind of a freak show in a way, and but every single one of them is treated with a lot of passion,
With
and
empathy.
care,
Yeah.
and empathy, exactly. And so it, I don't know, there's something about that. A, of course, it's relatable because I make movies and it's about making movies and stuff like that. But B, I think any artist who, film or not, would be able to easily relate to it. And even on a third kind of tier of that, people who aren't artists at all and have no real personal connection to anything that goes on in this movie, I think can still genuinely get a lot out of it. I mean, it's a funny movie. It's got great performances. Bill Murray is also someone who's fantastic in it, and he, all around,
Funny
all
as
across
always,
the board,
yeah.
it's a good movie,
And it's a good example of Johnny Depp and his performances before this is almost a decade before he did his first Pirates of the Caribbean film and turned into, mega international, worldwide, huge film star. And, he'd only done, I think, 5 films or so, something like that, 5, 6 films
and
before
a lot
this. of
them with or at least Edward Scissorhands.
He had done Edward Scissorhands with Burton before.
Yeah.
So it's a good example, I think, of early Depp work, which is really worth watching. But yeah, I share so many of the same thoughts that you just expressed. I saw the film when it was released. Tim Burton was at the top of his game and, height of his powers, at least, and maybe he's had a couple of those kind of, career points, because he's made a lot of movies that have made a lot of money. But this is, he had done the Batman films, and he had made a heck of a lot of dough, which is what I'm gonna guess allowed him to make a black and white film here in Ed Wood, which I think is a brilliant choice, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, so I saw it at the theater. Tim Burton was huge. Johnny Depp, I was a fan already. I was a big fan of Johnny Depp. I had seen Edward Scissorhands, and I just was excited to go see Depp's performance. And I think that's probably what drew me more than anything, maybe. I don't know if I was consciously a Tim Burton fan or anything at this point in time,
Yeah, I mean, I mean, me too. I would say that I like a lot of Tim Burton's movies. I really like the Batman movies.
Yeah.
I love this one.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'd consider myself a fan of Tim Burton's. I don't really know.
Yeah. I'm not even now, I'm not even really a fan now. I don't dislike him at all. And I'm really happy that he exists, because I think he's a very unique voice. And I always love that, when somebody has a very specific point of view and a unique, authentic voice. I mean, that's an absolute joy, even if it's not necessarily something that really pulls me in really close. But yeah, I mean, just to go back, so I think, I as a fan of Depp's, What's Eating Gilbert Grape had come out the year before, Benny and June before that. He had done, like you said, Edward Scissorhands. And I might have even seen Crybaby before this, which of course is a John Waters film from I think 1990, I think ish. So I was a real big fan of Depp's, and it was still kind of felt like he was this thing to discover still, So I was big into that, and I was kind of my dreams were kind of blossoming about wanting to be an actor, and so I went for that. But yeah, I mean, just as somebody who was interested in becoming a filmmaker or working in that industry, the film was fascinating to me at that point. And I had grown up, now not on Ed Wood's films, the real Ed Wood. I hadn't grown up on his films at all, but I definitely grew up on genre pictures, exploitation pictures, B flicks, because again, like I told the story before, but my parents were into those films and would invite friends over, and maybe once every couple weeks or a month or whatever it was, they would screen one of these cheesy genre movies. And that's how I fell in love with Mad Max, for example, which is hard to remember now, but in the way back when, the first Mad Max film was a total exploitation B flick, So I was kind of very familiar with this genre, and I enjoy these kind of goofy films, and so I kind of had fun with that when I watched the picture. So I definitely remember.
I think
that
what's what I also really love about this movie is that they kind of Tim Burton especially uses this as sort of a vehicle to air all of the gripes with the independent filmmaking process. They're filming outside on the street, and then the police car rolls around the corner, and then Ed Wood looks at all his crew and goes, "We don't know how to turn it, run!" And they all pick up the camera and run away. Or the everlasting quest for money, and everybody talks to has zero interest in the one lady who says that she's got $100,000 or something for him, and then is like, I gave you all I had when I gave you that 300. And then, it's just this great thing that I think anybody who has done independent film.
Oh yeah. Well, there's that
totally
element
relate
too.
To that you just get these, some people are just completely unreliable, and there's all these funny, but then there's always also this kind of core group of people that most people end up working with and becoming really great friends with.
Yeah.
Who are all very passionate and stuff like that. And So I can definitely relate to that aspect
now.
of it. And
Now,
and
like now
think
when I
that,
watched it again,
yeah,
I
yeah.
definitely had that. Yeah.
And I think that, I in terms of my first time, I honestly don't really remember what the first time that I saw it was or what my initial reaction was. I think I was like sick at home from school one
Mm.
day when I was and this is back when Blockbuster was still around.
Yeah.
And I think my mom probably just like went and rented a few movies for me from Blockbuster to watch while she
It
went to
just
work.
randomly picked this.
Yeah. And I think it was like this. I actually specifically think I remember which movies she got. I think it was like this, Gandhi, and There's Something About Mary.
I'll
Very
be darned.
strange slew of movies.
What a selection.
Yeah, but yeah, so I don't really remember my initial reaction. Of course, I've like always been interested in making movies, but I think to me it was just kind of like a funny movie with Johnny Depp and Dracula. And then I rewatched it probably, maybe around the time I graduated high school.
Okay.
And I think I connected to it a lot more emotionally. I think I just like really, really understood a lot of like the struggles of Ed Wood, even though, I don't know a lot about Ed Wood and so I'm not sure exactly what he was like in real life, but
the struggles of somebody in that position.
Yeah,
right?
and definitely the struggles of the Ed Wood that is presented in this film.
And I think that's like one of the real joys, and that's certainly what, this wasn't as much a part of my experience when I saw it the first time around, but and I haven't seen it in a very long time, but watching it now in preparation for this podcast after you'd recommended it, that is the number one thing that stands out to me by far is my connection to this film as somebody who I can so greatly empathize with a character who, and with this, I think we all, or most of us, have this part of us somewhere. It's larger in others, maybe smaller in others, but this part of us where we want something in life. We have a dream. Yeah. And at some point, hopefully, you're pursuing that dream. And inevitably, along the way, you're questioning, am I deluded? Do I have any talent in this? Is this something I should even be pursuing? Or am I just crazy? Have I tricked myself into thinking that this is my calling? Because you look at the world around you and we see examples of delusion all day long, especially in art and especially in filmmaking. And I've been involved with a lot of projects with a lot of really deluded people.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's kind of,
and I've been deluded myself, I can admit it.
It's somewhat depressing too, sometimes to meet people who like, especially I find this is very common, with actors because it doesn't really, it can cost a lot of money to try and be an actor, but
yes, it can
for the matter of like, you don't need equipment and stuff like that. So a lot of people kind of try and get into that type of thing, but there's a lot of people that you'll meet that just don't, and I think this is what this movie really touches on. That's really well is that you meet these people who are so passionate, like they've got all the energy and all the drive to do so, but they're just like, you just kind of want to tell them, like, sit them down and say like, you just don't got it. Like,
you need to go back to school, at least train some more. Well, look, and that's what I mean, and so for me, that was my connection to it here. There's also, that's a huge part of it. The other aspect of it is, that you've got this Scooby gang of outsiders with Ed Wood at the helm. And like you said, this film is extremely empathetic to these characters. And all of these characters are kind of, whether it's, wanting to, like, being obsessed with Agora sweaters or like saying, or being like allergic to liquid. I mean, and everything in between. These characters, they some of them look weird, they act weird, they have, all of these kind of, they're very eccentric people, but they come together and they form this family. And
that's never mean-spirited. It's
and that's what the filmmaking experience really feels like. Yeah. Like, that is what it feels like. And I don't care what film you ever working on, that's how it feels. You come together and you become a family, and you're working with people under stressful situations and very long days, often on locations. Everybody's away from home. And so you really get to know people well. And so people's like eccentricities are on display quite prominently in some instances. And so that's very charming. I mean, this film does a great job of kind of handling that aspect of this industry and this art in a really lovingly way and in an endearing way. And that really jumps out to me when I saw it this latest time.
Yeah, and I want to make a quick side note too that it's funny to me that not that this film is in any way similar stylistically to like a Herzog film, but the conversation we're having around this film sort of reminds me a lot of like the earlier episodes of the podcast, which is a lot about, perhaps it is because the movie is about making movies. But it's bringing me back a little bit to those early episodes.
Like, what are you thinking of? Yeah, what is it bringing you back to?
Just about the drive and the need for urgency, and it's like that this it kind of, I see, weirdly enough, similarities not in the quality of their work, but at least like there's
I love this comparison between Ed Wood and Herzog.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Okay, this is interesting. This is great. So I hadn't thought about this, but we're going to take like a little side trip here for just a minute, because I think this is fun. So, I think look, on the one hand, now you have Herzog on the one hand, and it's not like every movie he's ever made is a masterpiece, but he has definitely made masterpieces.
Yeah,
and I think anybody who has even a, cursory kind of, like any kind of barely, peripheral relationship with cinema could like realize that Herzog is very talented filmmaker.
Yes. Yeah.
In both documentaries and in narrative feature films. And he's proven this over and over and over. And you're right, Herzog talks about this urgency. I mean, where he'll write a script in just a couple days, and he, he's got this drive. He doesn't storyboard. There's like this intense level of passion and drive. And then you have Ed Wood, same thing, intense passion, intense drive. Look, not to get too cheesy, but you could say that Ed Wood was a soldier of cinema.
Yeah, they're kind of like two sides of the same coin, and I think that the differentiation is more so the talent.
But this is very interesting, and I'm not saying we're not going to be able to come up with any answers here, but just to kind of like just think about for a second, because talent is a very interesting term, especially in our modern culture. Now, other cultures have different ideas about what talent is, so I'm kind of speaking more from my experience, kind of a Western culture in current modern day. I've been around for 45 years, so I can't speak to what this might have been like 2,000 years ago. But now, talent has it's a very loaded term. I think people have interesting viewpoints on what talent is. Is it innate? Is it the result of a lot of work? Is it a combination of these two things? Is it something that exists inside you? Is it something that you channel from somewhere else? So this is interesting to me, because I don't know that it's just so simple as, well, Herzog somehow magically
has talent and
Ed Wood doesn't. I think that's way too that's oversimplistic, and I think it shortchanges what talent might actually be. But it's interesting to think about,
Yeah. It's definitely it's just kind of funny because I didn't think of about that really before.
Yeah, no, this
right
is
now there's a lot of through lines there.
And Herzog has, and look at somebody like Kinski, who is, Herzog built a team of outsiders, of eccentric people.
And Herzog is eccentric himself.
And he's look, he's nothing
to say the least.
To say the least. And this is beautiful, actually. I think that this is fun, and this actually kind of helps me appreciate this even more, I think, kind of thinking about this. And it makes you wonder, at the end of the day, I think, and again, we'll get back on track in a second, but, it also, I go through life kind of thinking, and especially as I get older and older, I kind of think, the end result doesn't matter that much. When I was really young, I thought that's all that mattered. And so if I were approaching a film project, for example, I would be like, well, nothing matters but what you get at the end of it. I don't believe that anymore now. I think the end result is kind of important, but by far and away, what's more important is the process of making it, in my opinion. And it's interesting that I feel like this film actually does a good job of kind of illustrating that, in a sense that it shows how much fun he has in the process of making a film. It shows the camaraderie and the family that's built around these films. It brings these people together who might be, quote unquote, too weird to do much else. And they've kind of found a home and a career and a purpose. And who cares if the film comes out at the end not that great? I mean, and this is a valid question.
And we are sitting here talking about Ed Wood.
Yeah,
So
all
it's
these
like
years,
it's like
70
he's
years
succeeded
later.
in that. He's immortal in that sense.
And
I think that's it's a great point that the and you get this feeling too. And again, this is specifically to talk about the movie rather than the real life experience, because we don't necessarily know what it was like on his sets or anything like that.
Right.
If it was, but in the film, I think what it presents really well is also this idea that like, even when people are, laughing at him or not making fun of, but like they disagree with him, that there's also this sense of just like, well, okay, we're gonna do it. Like, like the DP, there's a few moments where the DP is very clearly sitting there going like, I don't know what this is, but but no, that's what I mean. Everyone's, and like you get that big rap party at the end, not at the end, but probably 3/4 of the way in the movie, and they're all like dancing and having fun, and everyone's just so excited to be there and be in his next movie, and Bela Lugosi's excited to be in his next movie, and it's
and I've experienced this. I've experienced this, and it's very interesting because like there are many facets to all of these kind of things, and I just, I mean, why not? We're like digressing all over the place, so hey, great. But I've experienced this, and I've been on set, I've been on films where, I've seen a lot of things that I at least I perceive as likely challenges for the film as far as what the end result is going to be. At least from my perspective, I see a script that may not be as strong as it could be. I see challenges with performances. I see, and a lot of these are limitations with budgets, but limitations for a lot of different reasons. And what I see is that there's just like this energy is so infectious, and it's kind of, I mean, and I think anybody out there who's worked in the industry will know what I'm talking about, and you've experienced this, that there's just this like inertia that builds up. There's this like snowball effect, and people just get so excited with the process of making a film. For those people who are really there because they want to be, that you just like steamroll through all that stuff. I mean, and people ask like, how in the world did this horrible film get made? Well, the really cynical answer to that question is that, somebody somewhere wanted to try to make a quick buck. And that sometimes does happen. Sure.
Yeah.
But more often than not, the reason that this film got made and it's not very good is because everybody making it was like, just let's go for it. This process is so engaging and is so consuming that you just move through it anyway.
And I honestly think that it's actually not too difficult to discern between those two things of like,
which is why Ed Wood stands.
And I think that the matter of discerning, for me at least, is just that you can always feel the soul and the spirit of a movie that has, even if it's a really bad movie. And that's kind of why you get these things like, I know it's kind of talked to death, but like The Room, and why that has such a cult following. But then when somebody goes on and makes a film that is sort of intentionally bad, like that's its own genre on its own right now, where like a studio is like, okay, we're gonna make this intentionally stupid and bad, and those always fall flat
because they're cynical.
Exactly, and they're trying. There's a guy, the director named Neil Breen, who's this big. He's kind of like big online because he makes these really, really bad movies, but he thinks that he's amazing, and that's what I think is the differentiation.
That's what's endearing.
Whereas I could go watch Star Wars 9, which gave me a headache and gave me
I don't even know what
whiplash.
that is. What in the world was that one? I don't even know.
Yeah, it was the last one. The last
As
one,
the Force reawakens or something.
That one is so, like, that to me is just
Cash
soulless.
grab.
Like it's completely soulless. It felt like nobody wanted to feature. And that's the difference, is that you can feel. And I have direct experience with that. I just made the feature and feature. Like there's this, the only one. But I was, to speak to that kind of like on a personal level, there were sleepless nights. Absolutely. There was moments, especially before a big shoot, where it was like I would just get no sleep the night before because it was so stressful. But as soon as I stepped on set, I was not stressed at all. It was just a great, experience. It was really fun and it was engaging. And it's like, sometimes you don't really, if you are caring about the quality of the picture to such a degree that everyone is having a really bad time, then your movie's going to suffer in other ways for it. Whereas if you just trust your instinct and kind of go into it and go, you know what, I think that the choices that I make are going to be good either way, or at least hope so, then I think that you're going to get something else, which is something that, again, clearly has, passion behind it. And I think that is really, really the more important thing. And I definitely agree that, yeah, it's not the end product, to an extent, is not the biggest thing in the world as to what matters. Of course, you're trying to make the end product good. I think most people are. But at the same time, like the biggest learning as a director comes from the process rather than from sitting in a theater and watching the movie again and again. So I think that and it really encapsulates that kind of that entire feeling.
I agree. I think it does a great job of that too, without having to be on the nose about it, without having to be explicit about it. It's really just in how they handle the story as a whole.
And for a movie that is so heightened and so stylized and stuff like that, it really is subtle in a lot of really meaningful places.
I think you're right. Yeah,
the relationship, even just the fact that Bela Lugosi, who was addicted to morphine, how the only way that you really get a glimpse of that is just the makeup artist rolls up his sleeve to put some makeup on him, and there's just like a quick look, and you see the scarring from the like the injections, and then they just kind of look at each other, and then that's it, and that's all you need to know about where this guy's at. And it tells you so much about the character, it tells you so much about Lugosi in real life as well, because that is authentic, that is a true part of Lugosi's life. And so and that's sort of what I mean. And another way that it's very similar to Herzog is this kind of truth versus fact thing that we spoke about a lot during the masterclass, which is just this idea that it's representation versus like representation. And so I think that this movie is representing things that are based very loosely on true events in truth and true people. But it's distilling it down to an emotional reaction that an audience will have from watching it that will be more authentic than had they just made a true to life, accurate biopic.
Right.
Whereas something like Bohemian Rhapsody, like the Queen biopic,
such a horrible movie,
ago, which was awful.
Horrible.
But that's exactly, there was nothing done with that movie. It was just you might as well have sat down and had read the Wikipedia page.
Good and I
point. I think that to me, again, I wouldn't really classify this movie as a biopic, but it certainly is about someone who existed and
it's about a few people. It's at least about it. It's at least about Lugosi as much as it is Ed Wood, and honestly, it may be more quote unquote truthful, right, or factual. It's more, it's more factual. Factually accurate about Lugosi than it is about Ed Wood. But I think that it's truthful about both people, and even more so. Again, I agree. This is not. I wouldn't categorize this as any kind of biography. It's truthful about are all the things that we've just been discussing about what it means to be passionate about something, to put yourself into that, what it means to be an outsider and to build your own chosen family around something that you want to do. What it is to kind of, and I think, all of us, I'm going to guess, because it's at least everybody I've ever spoken to feels like an outsider a lot of the times in their lives, because we all kind of are encapsulated in this, meat bag that we walk around in, and our consciousnesses are always, tied to that. And it's like, we don't know what the hell else is going on in anybody else's mind, and we kind of live in our own world, and we're always wondering, like, what are other people thinking? You know what I mean? Most people I've talked to, it's like we all feel like outsiders to some extent. And
I kind of want to read a quote from Tim Burton too about exactly what we're talking about, which he said when he was asked about the accuracy. It's not like a completely hardcore realistic biopic. It's in doing a biopic, you can't help but get inside the person's spirit a little bit. So for me, some of the film is trying to be through Ed a little bit. So it's got an overly optimistic quality to it, which I think is very interesting. Again, that you're looking at a movie that, again, is looking at like the spirit of the person more so than just a slate of facts. And like, I'm sure that Bela Lugosi didn't actually sleep in coffins and stuff like that. but it also, I think the part that really works in this movie is that it also heightens just the absurdity of it all.
Yeah.
That I'm sure that, the real shoots and stuff weren't quite as eccentric and crazy as they were portrayed in the movie, but I'm sure that they were just as absurd. And I'm sure that the people that were working on these movies felt like they were just as in a much of an absurd situation as they really were. So yeah, and I think that truly is what really drives me to like this movie is just again, just this it's so stylized in such a brilliant way, and I like strong choices like that, and I would take a strong choice like this for the sake of, or like over the sake of accuracy, than the opposite.
Well, let's talk about that a little more then. Let's talk about that, because clearly, Tim Burton, clearly had proven from the very get-go with Pee-wee, and even through a major blockbuster film like was it his 2 Batman films that he did? Batman and Batman Returns?
Yeah, Batman and Batman Returns, and then Schumacher took over,
whoa, and then you want to talk about some strong choices. But, even with major studio blockbuster films, Tim Burton definitely, you can say a lot of things about him, but he certainly makes strong choices.
Absolutely,
and he, when you're watching a Tim Burton film. So let's talk about that in this, because I think this film is a little bit unique in the films that he's made in some ways. You had talked about how when we were kind of warming up for this, that you felt like his direction was maybe well, how about you? Why don't you I won't put words in your mouth.
Sure. No, I think that his direction here, what's interesting about this movie is that as eccentric and heightened as it is, I think what they've done, which is really brilliant, is toned down the Tim Burton-ness of it.
Yeah.
Which there
and
still is a lot.
What do you mean by that? What do you think?
So I mean, I think the immediate thing that people go to when they think of Tim Burton is like these very German expressionistic, like spirals, really eccentric set design and art direction that's very dreamlike and again, very, very German expressionistic. There's almost no German expressionism in this film. It's expressionistic in the way that Burton obviously is a very kinetic director and uses a lot of energy behind the camera and stuff like that. But again, it's a really toned down version of Burton. There's no crazy set design. And I think that what makes that so is that, and I think you put this really well in our kind of preliminary discussion, which is that it's like Burton directing through the lens of Ed Wood and through the lens of the 1950s.
Yeah, that's what
and so it's less, there's less overt Burtonisms in it. There's no really wacky costumes or but there still are. I mean, you can definitely also see though at the same time where Burton's passion for these types of movies came from, because Burton obviously is super inspired by like these 50s B movies. Well, just look at any of his work. He constantly comes back to Vampira,
Mars Attacks, and all that.
Exactly.
And I even, in the commentary track for this, he talked, or the writers actually talked about how it was when they were in the preliminary kind of negotiations of Tim Burton possibly directing this film. They talked very extensively about how there were a lot of parallels, and it's Burton was a big fan of Vincent Price's, for example, and he loved those films and genre films, horror films when he was growing up as a child, and so when he sought out and was able to then work with Vincent Price and Edward Scissorhands, that was a huge personal thing for Tim Burton. And so, of course, this very much mirrors the story here that you have with Ed Wood, that he was a huge fan of Lugosi's, and being able to work with him was a highlight of Ed Wood's career. So, I clearly he's very personally motivated, and I think this is a very personal film, probably more so than Batman or Batman Returns, or
without a doubt, yeah. So, and it might even be, perhaps be his most personal of anything.
It's possible, yeah.
And I think that's it's just a really it's one of those movies that just clearly has like a vision from the beginning to end of the process, not even just of the runtime, but of pre-production, production. There was very clearly, everyone was on the same page, from the cinematography to and even just the fact that it's shot in black and white.
Yep.
Which of course is always pain to get a studio to agree to, and some studios were saying that they wanted first look rights, or like cutting rights of final cut and things like that. And a lot of times what studios will do when somebody wants to shoot black and white is say, okay, shoot it in color and then we can put it in black and white. But I think it takes a really staunch director to say no, because
and one who's made hundreds of billions of dollars,
yes,
which is where Tim Burton was sitting at this point in time.
Yeah.
So
and
that helps.
And this movie, I can't imagine this movie in color.
Well, no, you can't.
I think that the black and white both brings you into the era, but also gives you this sort of subconscious, freeing of the mind in a way that you just buy into all these crazy antics that these people are going through.
Yeah, it helps.
It feels like a time capsule.
It feels like a time capsule. It helps so much putting you in the set and setting of this story. It helps put you right back into the mid-50s. It helps you, and because these were real people, and our kind of our recollections of these people are in black and white. Like Bela Lugosi, you don't see him in color.
I don't know what I don't know what Bela Lugosi looks like.
His eyes are, for example. So. I think it was absolutely the right choice. The film would be an entirely different film, I think, that if it were shot in color. So, kudos to Tim for that, for sure.
Yeah, and I think too, it's I know Spielberg talked about when he was doing Schindler's List in black and white,
which was also shot on the same film stock.
Yeah, and somebody, which is a beautiful film stock. Somebody asked why. And he said, because when you think of the Holocaust, when you think of World War II, everything you see from that era is in black and white, and that's how you imagine it. And I think that it's similar here. Of course, they're again very different movies, but for perhaps couldn't be more different from each other. But but I think that logic holds, in that you think of especially someone like Bela Lugosi, and it would be weird to see Dracula in color, and you even mentioned that there was a story about when they were doing screen tests with John Landau, or Martin Landau, not John Landau.
Correct.
I'm thinking of John Landis. When they were doing screen tests with Martin Landau, and that it was in color, and they were like, "Oh, something's off," and then they just switched the color off
the monitor to black and white. And it was like,
there was Dracula,
exactly.
So I think I think that if this movie was in color, it would have a totally different feel. I don't think it would work nearly as well. And I think that that's also a really, really key, a lot of people that I've spoken to write off, modern films, and I would consider this a modern film in terms of the scope of, this is 30 years after the advent or more after the advent of color, or not advent, but the normalization of color film. So it's not, they definitely were not shooting on black and white out of necessity. And I know that there's a lot of people that kind of scoff at that, and that kind of go like, oh, they're trying to be like artsy or whatever, and they'll kind of write off a movie that's in black and white these days because
that's what studios are definitely afraid of.
Yeah,
that people will write off black and white films and not see them.
But
Absolutely.
I think that this is a masterclass of an example as to why color matters, like why those choices matter.
I mean, it's a lot less of a gimmick than some director who I won't name here wanting to do their film in 4:3.
Yes. 4:3 or 48 frames per second. But I think, and it's also interesting too, that like there was a point when the movie that I was making, because I was going for a very Hitchcock style, that I was considering shooting it in black and white. And I didn't, but I watched the movie in black and white. I've like turned off the color, and I think that it would be it's definitely an interesting thing, and I think it's what is fun to watch them back to back like that is to again understand how much color can impact the feel, the mood of a movie, much more so than people think. And like all of these choices are important, down to like the feeling of, again, even aspect ratio. A movie that's 185 feels very different than a movie that's in 239.
Yeah.
And so I think that, the amount of times that I've gone into a movie, and not to get lost on this tangent, but the amount of times that I've gone into a movie and it's been in widescreen because people think it's been 239 widescreen because people think that makes something look more like, air quotes, cinematic.
You're right.
And I'm sitting there going like, the subject matter of this movie would fit 185 way more. And it's kind of funny that, and again, it works with color as well. And so I think that I'm so glad that they were able to get this movie shot in black and white. I think that it adds
and it's
so
not
much.
just and it's not just black and white, but it's high contrast.
Yeah,
it's very
shot
much
like it's in the 50s. Yeah,
because even though it's black and white, it could have been shot in a lot of different ways. It could have been lit in a lot of different ways.
Yeah,
and they really chose. Again, I think it's fun in a meta sense, and I think this is what we've talked around a lot, but not directly to so far. Is that what makes this film unique is that we are filming. So the subject was a filmmaker, and so Burton is shooting this film about a filmmaker in the ways that the subject would have shot his films. So trying to capture that spirit. So, and we talked earlier about limited camera movement and kind of, restricting the camera to ways that they would have likely moved it back then in the 50s. The choosing the film stock and the high contrast lighting, which is another way that that's how Ed Wood would have likely shot, or this genre films would have been shot in general in that way back then in the 50s. So it's it's kind of it's a really beautiful way of bringing us into the world of the subject of this film without having to tell us anything, by literally in the choices of the medium, in the film stock, in the lighting, in the camera. So at the most fundamental levels, bringing us into that world. And most people don't know consciously any of this stuff. Most people aren't film nuts like us, and they're not going to know any of this stuff, but they sense it. But as
it's subconscious so often. It
brings you right into that world. And so I just think that's beautiful.
Not only is it lit like a 50s movie, but it's again, like you said, it's lit like an Ed Wood movie. And one of the things that I noticed is in a lot of the outdoor scenes during the day exteriors, that it's almost like slightly overexposed, and it looks like they don't really have, this day and age when a large budget movie is shooting outside, and this is the way it's been for 50 years, is that they'll put up a flag above someone so the sun is not directly, brightly exposing one side of their face and the other side's in shadow, especially on film. But I noticed, one of the things that I kind of noticed for the first time when I watched it this time, was that a lot of the outdoor scenes clearly don't use that. They're just using kind of the natural light. Maybe they'll have a bounce or something below to, illuminate the other side of the face a little bit. But it's shot, it's not a bare bones movie. They had quite a large budget, respectively. But it is shot to imitate something that was shot on a bare bones budget.
I think so.
A lot of the lighting setups are very simple, but it's still really, really masterfully shot. And it's a beautiful film. Yeah. But it does it so well. The last thing I'll say about the look and the cinematography is that it's got one of the best jokes in the movie is when they hold up the red dress versus the pink dress or something, and they're like, which one looks better? And of course the movie's in black and white, and then the director of photography in the movie says, I don't know, I'm colorblind.
But go
for the dark gray one.
Go for the dark gray one. Yeah. That was cute.
Joke, yeah.
I had completely forgotten that from my first viewings way back when it came out. And I did think that was cute. And that's like a fine line, because that could be a joke like that could be too cute for your own good. Like that, you got to be careful. That's almost too cute, but it was fun.
It works. Yeah.
Yeah. It was fun. I mean, let's slide into a little bit performances, because I think I think we're talking about direction, we're talking about a lot of the visual aspects of the film, but clearly obviously Burton did a great job. I think this is one of the most key successes, things that makes the film a success, is that you've got a lot of characters here that are pretty eccentric. They're pretty out there. And I think it'd be really easy to misfire on tone for performance. Very, very easy. Up to and including, the lead here, Johnny Depp's performance. Now, Johnny is a very talented actor, but this is a really fine line. Where these people, they kind of were caricatures, you buy it. In a sense, it's like these characters are kind of taken to a level of caricature, but they're still genuine. It's still, the core of them is very believable, even if their behaviors seem very stylized and heightened. We buy it. And I think Burton does a really wonderful job of tying a lot of different types of actors and performances in tone together for this film. That really stood out to me.
Yeah, and Depp is so like charismatic and again genuine, and like he just has he captures this character of this constant optimist of, even when Bela Lugosi flips out at the guy for asking for, or calling him Karlov's sidekick. And then there's just that great moment where Depp comes over, Ed Wood comes over, and he's like, Bella, I totally agree. It's and it's like this great. And he's got such a great vocalization of even the characters, so fantastic.
But it's almost even like this, like these like 50s films with like, hey, see, and then I was walking down the street,
transatlantic kind of
and he's almost like
he's
kind of like talking in a way that we imagine and remember. A lot of films had characters speaking that way in that era, where it's this very heightened, stylized, quick
kind
way
of like
speaking.
Jimmy Stewart-ish almost. Like it's like that, where that Jimmy Stewart kind of has this energy about him all the time. It's this really positive and like
And but that could go horribly wrong,
Yes. If you do it one thing slightly different, it could be taken completely a different way and not work at all.
I mean, I think of like His Girl Friday as kind of like such the typical, kind of like film where people are speaking this way. Now that's a much earlier film in the 40s, but I don't know. There's just a lot of, but we buy
that was Cary Grant. Cary Grant was the most transatlantic,
Yeah.
Well, I'm here today to tell you about this.
There you go. Exactly. We had this kind of manufactured fake accent that actors used to use.
Yeah.
And, but you buy it. I think because the heart of it, as we keep going back to, is very genuine. But I mean, we talk about Johnny Depp and his performance is very fun, and we buy it. But Landau's performance, and of course he won an Academy Award, is I think exceptional in kind of another, in more dimensions maybe even than Johnny Depp's is, which is that his character's kind of trajectory, we have a lot more space there to kind of see some of his challenges as a character, and he does a really fantastic job of that. But I did want to say real quick before going off Johnny Depp, in the commentary he talks about, and gosh darn it, I can't remember exactly, but it sounds like Johnny likes to do this, because I remember listening about him talk to his the creation of his character for the Pirates movies, for example. And I remember he said, like, well, I took Keith Richards and I took, a couple other things and I mixed it together and I got Jack Sparrow. He did the same thing here. And it wasn't that he went back and looked at Ed Wood and said, okay, I'm going to try to copy what I see in Ed Wood's work. And I can't remember all of them, but he took Ronald Reagan.
Interesting.
As one of like three pieces for the work that he did to put together this character.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And gosh darn it, I wish I could remember the rest, and we'll have to go back and listen to the commentary track on that. So anybody out there, you can find that. But I thought that was hysterical that it was, and I think really vital that instead of doing, and we've talked about this, instead of trying to go back and let's say I'm going to nail the way that Ed Wood really spoke in real life,
his mannerisms, and
it was like, no, I'm gonna like reach for his essence and kind of go this sideways direction that's not so obvious. Like you wouldn't think Ronald Reagan, but it worked for him, and it kind of helped him get into the deeper, actual, honest spirit of that character, as opposed to trying to mirror the externalized, kind of what he looked and sounded like, which is always a trap when films try to do that.
Yes.
But yeah, just to go back to Landau, though, I mean, clearly an amazing performance. His daughter is in this film, too, by the way. And Ron Howard's father is in this film, which is interesting. There's like some kind of examples of Hollywood nepotism going on here a little bit. What? There's nepotism in Hollywood? No way.
Nah, are you kidding me?
No, there's nepotism everywhere, let's face it. So, but what about you? I mean, obviously those are standout performances. What are your thoughts
I think
on?
Sarah Jessica Parker is also, I think, fantastic. Like she I think really has this, again, sort of similar to Johnny Depp, where she like brings in this transatlantic accent a little bit, where she, but it's like this very, I don't even know which actor to kind of comment on, but it's it's like she'll, when she's like, "Do I really look like a horse?" Like it's like this like kind of thing, and it's like, well, that, and she's, she's got this great, it kind of feels like Leave It to Beaver. Like it's like
and
this
there's an energy. There's like
everyone is like, it reminds me of seeing like almost like really good theater in a way. Where actors often in theater are allowed to make like kind of bolder, bigger choices because there's sort of more of a suspension of disbelief in theater than there is in film. And I think this movie almost goes in that direction, even though it's all about film, although he does start out directing theater. I think that it's just, like every I think, and it's rare to see this in a movie, every single character, no matter if they have 3 lines or the main character, had clearly, the actors put so much thought into the characterization. The 2 guys that are the police officers, I can't remember, but they were in a bunch of Ed Wood's movies.
In
those
real
two
life,
guys are hilarious in this movie, and they have like 5 lines, but like every time they're on screen, and he's like, "Well, I heard this one was going to be his biggest picture yet." It's like this like everyone is just doing. And I think that there's no better feeling when you're doing a movie that is kind of like in this kind of subject area or genre area, when you get actors who are willing to do that, who are willing to just, like, again, throw out the sake of authenticity for something that is really energetic and truer in sort of more of an emotional sense than a like factual one.
I mean, and the film's loaded with great, Bill Murray is hysterical. I think you mentioned him earlier.
Yeah, Bill Murray's fantastic. I always forget Bill Murray is in this movie as well, because it's such a movie that you wouldn't really think of him being in, and he's not like the lead.
Yeah, and I kind of vaguely, gosh, I don't want to get this wrong, but this is just kind of like my own recollection, was that, when this film came out,
well, he'd just done Groundhog Day.
He had just done Groundhog Day, so he had, this was part of a bit of a resurgence for him. Groundhog Day was obviously like an extraordinary film, not resurgence, but I guess elevation, because it's not like he had fallen off the radar.
Scrooged
because he did Scrooge in Ghostbusters
99 or 89.
But I think this really like took him to another level as far as where people were like, wow,
You can almost also sort of see the characterizations that he, like the style of performance that he almost gives in like a Wes Anderson movie here, where he gets less of the kind of fraternity screwball comedy type thing into more of a subtle theatrical comedy kind of style, and because even if you watch Groundhog Day, he's still sort of in that like Ghostbusters again, kind of manic SNL fraternity,
sarcastic kind of.
But then this one, he's not. There's certainly the air of Bill Murray sarcasm. I don't think you could strip that away from it all.
I don't think
killing
so.
him. But it's subtle, and he's playing this role that is so unusual for him. That's so, my first choice for this role probably wouldn't have been Bill. I wouldn't have even thought of Bill Murray. And yet I think that the way that they casted him, and I don't know exactly how he was cast, if they
I don't
him
either,
or if he was interested in doing it. He just works so well. It's one of those like really unexpected things, kind of like, Adam Sandler in Punch Drunk Love, where, you don't expect Adam Sandler as I actually think that Adam Sandler has some pretty good acting chops.
Very narrow, I think, but that's a topic for another day.
but you don't expect someone like that to pull off a role like Uncut Gems or like Punch Drunk Love. And then but sometimes they're almost like the best actors for them, or even, Jack Black has done some more dramatic roles that aren't as comedic, and he's done really well in them. Say what you want about the 2005 King Kong movie, but I think he plays the role of Carl Denham in that super well. And so it's sort of a similar thing with this.
I've never seen it.
Now, it's actually, that movie gets some flack, but I actually think it's very long, but I think it's a pretty fine movie. It really is a really good homage to the original.
I'll have to check it out someday. But I mean, and then it's like, so we've talked, Johnny Depp, Martin Landau, Sarah Jessica Parker. I mean, we didn't mention, but Patricia Arquette is in this. And of course, I think she was just coming off 93's True Romance, Tony Scott's film that I love, quite frankly, and we might do that someday here.
I do love Tony Scott.
because I think True Romance is a fantastic film, but she had just come off that. I think she's almost, in a way, kind of the most normal.
Yeah, she does less, and I think that's probably intentional.
But it's like I think it's kind of a sweet way to show that like and maybe this is just me reading into it, but that as eccentric as you might be, you can connect to the quote unquote square world, and you can find love and acceptance in this world, and that even when you see people outside of you and they look well put together and they look like they're quote unquote normal, they aren't usually, almost certainly, that we're all kind of these eccentric outsiders. And so for me, it kind of, felt a little bit like that it was an opportunity to kind of subtly go in that direction. Hey, you can connect to quote unquote normal people, and we're all kind of in one big pot. So Jeffrey Jones, somebody else who probably would stand out to anybody who's a fan of like 80s cinema. Jeffrey Jones is in it. Just like I said, I mentioned Juliet Landau is in it. Of course, Juliet went on to do a really wonderful job on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the television show. And God, I don't want to get this wrong for anybody who's a fan, but I think it's Drusilla was her character's name. And she was
not sure. I've never seen Buffy, so
she was outstanding. She was really, really strong in that show. I think she had a recurring role for a very long time, probably like the entirety of the. I think she was on it almost from beginning to end. And then we've got Vincent D'Onofrio. As Orson Welles. Just fun stuff. So a lot of really
Which
fun
again, I always forget that he's in this movie as well.
I almost don't reckon just the way he's lit.
Vincent D'Onofrio is a funny actor because I almost forget that he's in. Like I always forget that Vincent D'Onofrio is in Full Metal Jacket. And
that's the one thing I always think of from him. It's hard for me to even remember other things. That is the big Private Pile.
But he's been in a lot. Like if you look up Vincent D'Onofrio, I actually really like. I think that he's a really
very
great
talented.
Actor.
He's extremely
he's a really, really great guy. I've heard that he's like very kind and
I mean, he's been in a million films, and a lot of really great films, and gosh, boy, I'm just looking here at his filmography. I mean, more than I could remember. I couldn't believe. Wow, yeah. So he's been in a ton of things. Here's another one that might be fun to do someday: The Cell. But a lot of great films. So yeah, I mean, it's stuffed with good performances. I think really strong casting choices by Burton. Nobody here in the film strikes me as kind of out of place or not well suited for their role. Just again, I think just more evidence that Burton is just on top of his game with this film.
Yeah, and I think the last thing just to mention quickly too is Howard Shore's score.
Oh, let's not forget Mr. Shore.
And Howard Shore is one of my favorite composers. I love
the theremin.
And the theremin, and he goes just like every other aspect of this movie. Howard Shore goes all in on the 50s,
Yep.
B-movie kind of sound, but also again in the more touching moments, he goes really soft and subtle and gets really nice. And I like how he invokes Swan Lake because of course that was the opening music to Dracula. So he invokes Swan Lake whenever Bela Lugosi has a struggling moment. And it's interesting that he didn't. So they actually went with Howard Shore versus Danny Elfman, who was Burton's usual composer.
Okay, so Danny Elfman had worked with Burton before, right?
Pretty much every single one of Burton's major movies.
And after too, right? Did he go back?
Yeah, but they had, so apparently on Batman Returns, which was 92,
they have a fight.
The pressure to get it done gave them some strain in their relationship, and then Elfman also did Nightmare Before Christmas, and they had some creative differences on that. So I think he just decided to go with Shore, perhaps take a little vacation, give each other a little break, but pretty soon after they went back to working together.
Interesting.
Because I think Elfman still to this day scores most of his movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I like Danny Elfman a lot, but I'd say that Howard Shore was a perfect choice for this. He really, I remember I did a fake magic show at a camp
Wait. What's a fake magic show?
So it was like a magic show that was intentionally bad.
Okay,
like,
gotcha.
I would give someone a card, and then
I'm like, magic is already fake.
Yeah, and I'd be like, "Is this your card?" And they'd be like, "No," and I'd be like, "Yeah, that's right." I was kind of playing a fake like David Blaine, kind of like where all of my tricks went bad. But I had the entire time. My playlist for the music was the Howard Shore theme of this, so it's like Ooh, so I was like kind of walking across the stage and doing my thing with that. I had a partner.
Is there any video of this?
I don't know. There might actually be some somewhere. But then the second song was Abracadabra by the Steve Miller Band.
Oh my God. Oh.
So yeah, that's my Howard Shore connection to the Ed Wood.
I love it. I love it. Well, wonderful stuff. I mean, I think I've enjoyed revisiting this film. It definitely filled my heart with love for my fellow filmmakers out there, regardless of success, external success or talent. It's a good reminder that, at least from my perspective, that, we're in this for the families that we create while we do it, and we're in it for the journey. And, otherwise it's a profoundly small percentage of us that get to work at the level that we aspire to. Let's face it. Most filmmakers aspire to work at a level that only a few hundred filmmakers actually ever get to work at.
I mean, hey, even if I got to the Ed Wood level and I was remembered in 50 years, I'd be happy. So,
well, there you go. I mean, and enjoy the ride while you're doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, thanks for picking the film. And as always, I really enjoyed our conversation, Cullen. I look forward to next time. I've got to start thinking about what my film will be for our big 5-0 episode.
Yes, the 50th. Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun. So, all right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We hope that you enjoyed it, and we will catch you on the flip side. Until then.
Bye-bye.